Hi, everyone. This is Scott Benjamin with FunSpot Manufacturing. Welcome to Tuesday Town Hall. Glad you've taken 45 minutes or so of your day to spend it with us. We've been talking a lot about a number of different things around the family entertainment industry when it comes to opening parks, cleaning parks, operating, and just making sure that we have our marketing squared away. Today, we're going to talk about an interesting subject called the 4 disciplines of execution. You can see on screen, I have Adam Hoar. Adam, welcome.
Hey, Scott, thanks for having me. Appreciate that.
Glad you're here. When we built out the Tuesday Town Hall, there were a couple of resources that I really wanted to make sure were there for people to click on. And one of them was this idea from a book called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. And so if you look on the Tuesday Town Hall website, you'll see a link to a short video that describes the principles around the 4 disciplines of execution. Adam is a friend of mine. We've known each other close to 20 years. He's actually implemented and executed on these 4 disciplines of execution in businesses that he's been a part of. So I thought it'd be great to have him on today. He's been a big help in a number of areas to me personally, and is a great friend. So Adam, let's talk about, jump right in and talk about the 4 disciplines of execution.
Awesome. This is a topic I love to talk about. I read this book, gosh, probably 5 or 6 years ago, and it still remains one of my top 3 favorite business books in giving me a roadmap on how I can actually move businesses and organizations forward, not just good ideas that make me feel good, but something I can actually apply. And so I am excited to talk about it.
Yeah, and when I thought about it as it related to a retail or a family entertainment center, I was like, well, yeah, there are a lot of really good applications for that. I mean, there's no shortage of good ideas when it comes to how to grow your business, how to make your team more successful, make your work environment better, increase your customer satisfaction, all those things. And so there are some really different ways. And so as we go through these 4 disciplines, and you flesh them out, I think you'll be able to really give those listeners that are operators some ideas about how they might take them and use them.
Yeah, in fact, I think they do a great job in the book sharing stories of application from all different industries. Because sometimes, a lot of times as business owners or people that are running organizations, we think, well, hey, we can almost see the application for other organizations. Wow, if I was just in that business, I could see exactly how I could do it. But then sometimes when we're in our own organizations, it's hard for us to see the application. But there's great examples in the book of grocery stores using it. And you think, it can't be that difficult, right? They just sell groceries.
Right.
But how they can drive their business forward, and one store can outperform another one simply by applying these principles. How growing crops, how manufacturing, whatever your organization or your business is about, there's ways that you can apply this in your business. And it's simple, but it's not easy. It's something that if you'll dig into it and really understand these principles, it's something that you can apply. I've seen it make drastic changes for organizations.
Well, great. Well, let's jump right in. Do you want to give an overview of kind of what the are, and then we can unpack them each one by one?
Yeah, I'd love to. So 4 disciplines of execution, as the title says, there's 4 of them, and they're pretty simple. The first one is discipline number 1 is focus on the wildly important. They call it a WIG, a wildly important goal, and so we'll unpack more of what that means. But basically what happens is within the day-to-day, within our organizations, within our businesses, there's constantly things happening around us, right? None of us are ever at a loss for something to do within our businesses. There's always something happening. The problem is that if we just react constantly, if we're just constantly in a situation where we're saying, well, today, what fire do I need to put out? Then we never really find ourselves moving our business forward, our organization. We're focusing on the day-to-day. Maybe the business got done today, but we find ourselves maybe 3, 5, 10 years down the road, and we think, gosh, how are we still in the exact same spot as where we were when we began this journey? And so discipline number 1 is focusing on the wildly important. Then discipline number 2 is to act on the lead measures. And so we'll talk a little bit about the difference between a lag measure and a lead measure, and we'll talk about some examples of those. But essentially, lag measures are results. They're things that they happen because of the activity or inactivity. They're the results. And the way that we drive results is we define what the lead measures are and we act on those. And then the third one is to create a compelling scoreboard. So, one of the concepts they talk about in the book is that we need to know whether we're winning, right? We need to be able to look and say, right now, in this given moment, are we winning? Are we ahead of the 8 ball? Or are we behind the 8 ball? And the way that we do that is we've got to create a compelling scoreboard. It's great to have this all on paper. It's great to build these gigantic processes and have spreadsheets and all kinds of systems. But if we can't look and see if we're winning or not, no one's going to play that game. And then the last one, and this is where really the execution of, or the kind of this, it's the glue that brings them all together. And it's the idea of creating a cadence of accountability. Mm-hmm. In other words, we can do step 1, step 2, step 3, principle 1, 2, and 3. We can focus on the wildly important. We can know what the lead measures are. We can have that scoreboard. But if we're not regularly applying it and doing something with it, then what's going to happen? The whirlwind's going to take over. The busyness is going to take over, and we're going to miss it. So those are the four. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes into them, but the 4 disciplines are right there.
Well, you just throw out the word whirlwind, which I know is a part of that first discipline, and I know I get sucked in the whirlwind every day.
Gosh. Yeah, constantly, right?
Yeah, constantly. My email box is pinging, LinkedIn's pinging, the phone's ringing, I'm getting a text, I'm getting a WhatsApp, getting a Zoom call. I mean, there's just so many ways to get in touch with people today.
It's why I think a lot of times we get up at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning because we're like, hey, I can get 3 or 4 hours of uninterrupted time before craziness happens, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think we can all relate to the whirlwind, and I think having a plan that's a discipline with a wildly important goal really helps focus at least a portion of your time and day, so that you're focusing on what is wildly important. Yeah. So maybe you can unpack that a little bit, because I think there's some really neat learnings around that wildly important goal.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've nailed it, right? Within our business, there's the whirlwind. It's everything that happens throughout the course of the day, throughout the course of the week, throughout the course of the month. And here's the interesting thing about the whirlwind. You don't control it. You and I are not in control of the whirlwind, right? We don't know what we're going to get faced with day to day. We think we come in with this great plan of here's what my day is going to look like from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I'm going to do that. And then all of a sudden, an employee crisis happens, a customer calls and they've got a problem, manufacturing's off, something happens and boom, our day goes to just craziness. And so the idea of the whirlwind is that the whirlwind, it happens to us. It happens to our day. It's not something that we have control over. And so if we're not careful, then what we do is we'll find ourselves just going through long periods of time without ever having any intentionality. We're just reacting. So what the first discipline talks about, it says, okay, if I were sitting down and looking at a business and I were going to say, okay, I need to set some goals. I need to set some wildly important goals. Then the question that I'd ask myself is I would say, Scotty, if we're looking at our business, if everything were to remain exactly the same, if nothing were to change, the whirlwind were to stay exactly how it is and nothing were to grow in sales and our customer service didn't get any better, if it stayed exactly as it was, what are the 1 or 2 or 3 areas that if I put an immense amount of pressure, I really put some intentional time into it, I really put some intentional focus, if I really focused in these couple of areas, then these 2, 3 things would make the most amount of impact within my organization? Mm-hmm. That's the question that we asked ourselves to help define what a wildly important goal is. Because here's what the research shows and what has shown time and time again is that if we focus on 1, 2, 3 things, then we get all those things done, right? If we say, okay, these 1 to 3 things are super important and that's what we're going to focus on, we can accomplish those things. But then if we focus on 4, 5, 6 things, then maybe we get half of them done. We focus on more than that, we don't get any of them done. Yeah. And so sometimes we think we've got these long lists of all these good things that we need to get done. Well, the reality is that focusing on the wildly important forces us to really build some constraints and say, here, if everything remains the same, it's okay if this little thing over here doesn't get any better. But these 1 or 2 or 3 things right here that I'll focus on, if I really put some immense pressure here, they're going to have the greatest amount of impact on my organization.
Yeah. So and the whirlwind is going to stay. So
absolutely. Yeah. It doesn't go away. Right. Yeah.
Pick the 1 or 2, maybe 3. I think even 3 can be stretching.
Yeah, 3 can. Yeah,
is really difficult. But what can you move the needle on? And I'm thinking, if I'm an operator in today, what is the whirlwind is even more complicated than it was 9 months ago. So what is something that I could put out as a wildly important goal if all things remain the same? And I'm thinking maybe that's I want to take my birthdays from 5 to 10, in the next 90 days or a month or a week, 5 to 10 a week, because they're lower, or 10 to 30. There's just some definition, and there's a way to write your goal, right?
You nailed it, right? That was it. So a true formula for a wildly important goal is not just we want to get better at having more satisfied customers, or we'd like to have some more birthday parties, right? Those aren't wildly important goals. A wildly important goal fits into a formula that says, here's where we are now. So from some state that you exist in now to some new state where you want to go by some period of time, right? Some execution period of time. So, probably one of the greatest examples of a from, and the formula is from X to Y by when. Probably one of the greatest examples of this is if we think about the space race back in the 50s and the 60s. So, back in the 50s, we've got NASA, we're kind of competing against Russia and some of these other countries. Okay, who's going to be the first into space and different things, right? And the United States was behind. We were behind. And then all of a sudden in the early 60s, Kennedy gets elected, and he makes this statement, and his statement was, we will put a man on the moon and return him safely back to Earth by the end of the decade. So what he was doing is he's creating a wildly important goal. He didn't define everything about how they were going to do it. He just set out the wildly important goal that says we're going from not having somebody on the moon to having somebody on the moon and safely back by the end of the decade in 10 years. Yeah. And the crazy thing was that it brought all this immense amount of focus to the space race, to NASA. It didn't create this environment of people saying, gosh, I can't believe he put this timeline. Now everybody had a reason, a rallying point, something they were chasing. And you know what? We accomplished it.
Yep.
So yeah, you're right. There's a formula for it of from X to Y by when, and defining each one of those goals.
Okay. So we're sitting down with our team, our leadership, and we're thinking through, okay, we've got the whirlwind. Yeah, we get that. We could probably spend half of our meeting just defining what the whirlwind is, which isn't a bad exercise. And then we've decided, okay, we want to do X by Y, or move from X to Y by Z, and we've got that written down. Maybe we've created a second one. What's the second discipline that helps us get there and move the needle?
So yeah. The first one is the easy part. The second one is where the rubber really starts to hit the road. So second discipline is define the lead measures. And so what we've got to do is we've got to talk about what's the difference between a lead and a lag measure. So if you think about, let's say that I have a goal to lose weight, right? That's my wildly important goal. This year, I want to go from X, from this weight, to a new weight, Y, by 12/31/2020, right? So now I've got a wildly important goal. Now, what's the weight loss is a lag measure, and here's the thing about a lag measure: it's the result of everything that we do, right? I can put that down, but nothing's going to change unless I focus on the lead measures that drive my ability to lose weight. And we all know what those two things are, right? What are they, Scotty?
Diet and exercise.
That's right. Diet and exercise. Calorie intake, calorie burn, right? So if I can control the amount of calories that I'm eating, and I can control the amount of calories that I'm burning, then I believe that those two things are predictive of the outcome that I'm looking for. Now, do they guarantee it? No, because sometimes our bodies react in different ways to different things, and sometimes our businesses, our organizations react in different ways to different things. And so these are what there are very best guesses at what we believe will create the result that we're looking for. And sometimes we have to change those lead measures. That's the thing about a lead measure, is that we can look at it and say, maybe after 6 or 8 weeks, we determine this thing really isn't, I'm putting a lot of pressure here, but it's not creating the result that I'm looking for. Maybe we need to adjust.
Yeah.
But the reality is those lead measures have to fit into 2 criteria. The first one is they have to be predictive of an outcome. We have to believe that these are really going to produce the outcome that we're looking for. And then number 2, I have to have some measure of control over them, or the teammate, the person responsible, has to have some level of control over them. So if we think about, if I'm a farmer and I want to produce my crop yield at the end of the year, and we might determine, in order to do that, what are the lead measures? Well, one of them that I don't have any control over is rainfall. So I can't say rainfall is a lead measure because I can't control rainfall.
Right.
But what I can control is irrigation or water, right? So I may say, I'm going to make sure my lead measure is to ensure that X amount, I don't know anything about irrigation, but X amount of water is applied to every square foot of my fields, right? Whether it be in rainfall or in irrigation. I'm controlling the total amount of water, which is something that I have control over. So as long as it fits those criteria, as long as it's predictive of the outcome that we're looking for, and that I have some level of control over it, then that would be a lead measure.
So in thinking about my birthday party example, we want to increase our birthday party bookings from 5 a week to 10 a week in the next 90 days.
Sure.
And so the lead measure is not the number of birthday parties we booked.
Right. That's the lag. You're right. Yep.
That's the stepping on the scale and realizing I've either moved the needle or not.
Sure.
But a lead measure could be, I need to make 10 phone calls a day to people who've booked parties in the past.
That's right. Yeah. So here would be a couple. Yeah.
I pick up the phone.
That's right. What do I have control over? So maybe you have 3 or 4 lead measures. One might be, we're going to ensure that everyone at a front counter is talking to every customer about our birthday promotion that we're running for the next 90 days. Mm-hmm. Book it now, right? So I'm sharing the details about it. Number 2, I'm going to have a sales team contact at least 10, 15, 20, whatever that number is, potential folks that might be interested in booking a birthday. And how I define those may be, a third one would be, someone else may be responsible for exporting some data out of the existing database that says, here are all the kids that are in this age range from 7 to 11 that have birthdays coming up in the next 90 days. Mm-hmm. And so now we've got 3 lead measures. Number 1, someone's responsible for pulling that list. Number 2, someone else is responsible for making the phone calls. And number 3, everybody at the front desk is responsible for sharing it with customers as they come in. Yeah. Now, those don't guarantee. We could do all of that and not book a single additional party. However, we all know that it's very likely, it's very predictive of the outcome that we're looking for, that if we do those activities, that we're likely to see the number of bookings go up for our birthday parties.
That's right. And having the wildly important goal of first discipline and having, created these predictive lead measures is something that keeps you focused, because the whirlwind is going to steal away all your time to pull the data, to call the people, and to get your team focused on telling everyone, hey, have you booked your party here? The whirlwind is going to steal that away from you if you don't have the second 2 parts of the
You're leading right into the next one.
And we did not practice this, I promise.
No, but hey,
we love the concepts.
Softball, you just lobbed it up. Now, if I miss it, it's on me, right? So, but yeah, so the third discipline is that we've got to have a compelling scoreboard. We've got to know whether we're winning or not. It's got to be clear. And here's the thing: if you think about, we've all been to a football game or seen a football game, whether it's been on a Friday night with high school or college or watched it on Sunday. When you look at a scoreboard, there's only 3 or 4 primary pieces of information on that scoreboard, right? There's the scores of the 2 teams, right? You have this many points, I have that many points. There's how much time is left, right? When's the clock running out? How much time do I have left? And who has possession of the football. That's pretty much all that's on the scoreboard. Now, if you think about all the analytics that exist right now in football. Think of all the things that the coaches are looking at on a weekly basis: yards per carry, potential yards per play, all the defenses that exist, all the offensive plays, right? That's all coaches' scoreboard stuff. I mean, we could go on forever looking at all those numbers that exist. And ultimately, those things are interesting, but they don't tell us whether we're going to win the game or not. What tells us whether we're winning the game is when we look up at the main scoreboard and know what's your score, what's my score, how much time is left, and who has the ball right now. So when we think about creating a compelling scoreboard, what it has to be, it has to fit into a couple of criteria. Number one, it's got to be simple. It can't be this complex amount of information, this complex algorithm, something that someone has to calculate. That isn't going to work. People need to be able to just say, is it simple? And I can clearly see what's going on. The next thing is that it's got to be visible to everybody who's playing the game. So if we've got the scoreboard on the computer of somebody who's in a back office and they're typing in some numbers and looking at the scoreboard, but everybody who's playing the game has no idea what's happening, that isn't going to work. The scoreboard has to be visible to the people that are playing. Has to be something they can see, that they can reference when they walk in, when they walk out, they know what's going on. The next thing is that it's got to show you both the lead and the lag measures, right? So the lead measures are the things that we're doing to create the results that we're looking for, the lag measure. Well, if we're only showing the lag measure, then we only know whether the game's winning or not, but we don't know whether what we're doing is actually influencing it. And if we don't have the lag measure and we only have lead measures, then we just don't know if we're winning or not. So you got to have both of those things, right? Yeah. And the last thing is that it's got to be clearly visible whether we're winning or losing. Are we ahead? Are we behind? Sometimes I think about, and this is the very, very basic one because this is only a lag measure, but you remember those old things that you used to see in in manufacturing places that said X number of days since our last incident, right? So, 187 days, and then all of a sudden something happens and you go back to 0. Well, that's a lag measure, right? That's just the end result. But it needs to be that clear, that obvious as to whether you're winning or losing.
Yeah, and I think one of the things when I've had the opportunity to kind of walk a team through this that's important is that your team gets to be creative and have fun with that scoreboard, because then they're invested in walking by and looking at it. I mean, it doesn't have to be a printout from some dashboard out of Excel that only an MBA would understand. I mean, you can use markers and charts and depending on your team and thinking about the environment that we're speaking to, the people who operate adventure parks, trampoline parks, family entertainment centers, employing 15, 16, 18, 21, 22-year-olds primarily. If you got some of those on your team, I mean, they're going to be wildly creative in how to play, whether they're winning or losing. And so let go.
Yes. I mean, it's not one of the 4 disciplines, but I mean, the whole idea of this is not something that needs to come completely from the head of the leader. Yeah. In fact, it doesn't work that way, because if it's all our ideas and we just bring it and dictate it to the team and just pronounce, hey, here's what we're going to be all about, then a lot of times the team doesn't get on board. But when we come to our team and we say, hey guys, here's something that's important. We want to, you got to unpack these ideas for them. You say, guys, we're busy. Kids are jumping on trampolines. People are have questions about, is my kid old enough to do the climbing wall or whatever? You constantly have whirlwind going on. But in the midst of that, here are some places where we really want to move our organization forward and let them give input to them. Then it becomes something that's theirs and they own it. And then you ask them to help you build the scoreboard even more so, right? It's something. It's funny. One of my first jobs out of high school was working for the Gap, and we had this scoreboard on the back of the door as we went from the stock room out to the floor, and it literally had every employee's name, and it just had little places where you put stars on there. And there was, I don't even remember what it was particularly that we had to do, but if you were caught doing these things, you got a star. And at the end of the month, the top guy was the employee of the month, and you got different prizes for different things, but you knew Every time you open that door, you knew who was ahead for that month, who was the leader, it was very, very clear of what was going right and what wasn't going right.
Yeah, and who was playing and all those things. There's nothing wrong with some friendly competition.
Yeah, absolutely.
Motivate your teams to do well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, we want it to become theirs. And it doesn't, oftentimes we think, okay, well, if I can build this fancy dashboard out of our operating system, or if I can come up with this really complex spreadsheet, hey, listen, those things are important and we need that data sometimes to make decisions, but that's not what our employees, that's not what a 16-year-old, 18-year-old who's working the floor of a jump park is looking for. They're looking for something that engages them quickly and they can see easily. And you know what's going to happen is that if it engages them, there's going to be this healthy, friendly competition that happens amongst the employees within the organization that just happens naturally. So
right.
definitely want them involved.
Yeah. All right. So we've created our widely important goal. We've understood what our lead measures and our lag measures are. We've done a bang up job on creating this really cool scoreboard, and we put it in the break room where everybody can see it. It's visible to all. It's being updated, at a regular cadence. How do we keep things rolling from there?
Well, you just nailed it right there, the regular cadence. So let's say that the first three happen and we're not doing the regular cadence, right? So the first three, we do all the work at the beginning, and we've done this before. And if we've ever been a part of organizations, we've seen this happen. Do the hard work up front. We define what the wildly important goals are or something like that. We figure out, here's everything that we're going to do. Here's everybody that's going to be involved. Here's how we're going to measure it. We get super excited. And 2 weeks later, nobody's had any conversations about it, right? Nobody has brought it up. Nobody's engaged with it at all. And the next thing we know, it's just one of those things that was a good idea that went to the graveyard. And so the fourth discipline is that we have to have a cadence of accountability, a regular cadence of accountability. And what I'd recommend is this is something that happens every single week. So you pick a time, you pick a date, you pick a location, and you say for 20 minutes, it doesn't matter if the building's burning down. We're not talking about the whirlwind. We're only talking about these wildly important goals. We're only focusing in on how we can continue to have these goals move forward. And so without that cadence of accountability, with that regular meeting, then it's just a bunch of good ideas. And so what that looks like, there's three components to that accountability meeting. The first one is when we first come into that meeting. Well, first of all, obviously we've got the scoreboard. Everybody can see it, right? It's available for people to see. So when we first come into the meeting, outside of the very first week, so week number 2, the first thing we do is we report on the commitments that we made the previous week. So that means somebody the last week had to actually write down what the commitments were, right? Had each person in the meeting, they are going to make a commitment or a number of commitments, they have to write those commitments down. We have to know what they are. So the first thing we do is we come in and we say, hey, last week I committed to calling 10 people. I did that. I made my 10 phone calls, right? So I report on my commitment that I made last week. Then the second thing is that we update the scoreboard, and we update both parts. We update the lead measure and the lag measure, right? So we say, I made 15 phone calls last week to the list that was provided to me by this other person. And of those 15, I had 2 birthday parties booked. Everybody gives high fives, claps, right? We celebrate. We say, yes, awesome. It's producing the result that we're looking for. Even if they don't, even if they say, hey, I made my 15 phone calls and none of those booked. Awesome job making our phone calls. Hey, listen, that was a tough week. It didn't turn out the result, but we feel like we're confident that it's gonna produce the result we're looking for. So great job pushing through and making those phone calls. And maybe the next person shares and they say, I made 15 phone calls and I booked 3. So we're able to point to that success and say, see, their opportunity is out there.
Maybe they say, hey, last week I committed to 10. I made 7. And this is where I learned from that. And this is how the whirlwind caught me. And this is how I'm going to do better next week.
Yeah.
It's a learning experience on how to apply these disciplines on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, and so you just nailed it, right? That's the third one. The third one is that I'm going to make a new set of commitments based on what I learned from the previous week. Because maybe what I learned was, gosh, the whirlwind's more powerful than I thought it was. And so I've got to commit to ensuring that I'm going to follow through on my full commitment and not just part of it. I've got to make sure that I get that part done. Or maybe the commitment is, maybe let's say we've made an example of where or the example is that I've made my 10 or 15 calls week after week after week after week after week, and the results aren't there. Now we got to start talking about, well, what can we do different, or what do we need to do different?
Yeah.
Maybe we need to have some different approach to it. Maybe someone else has seen some success in another area, and so we need to we need to change our lead measure so that we're able to impact the lag measure the way that we hope to. The beautiful thing, they give an analogy in the book where they talk about, so let's say that we're responsible for running a manufacturing plant, and the responsibility that I have is to ensure that safety is at 98% compliance, right? We go, have less than 2 accidents a year, whatever that looks like. Well, that'd be the lag. That's what I'm going for as a wildly important goal. The lead measure could be that I need to ensure that all the teams have safety goggles. And then number 2, I need to ensure that they're wearing them during the work hours when they're operating machinery, right? So I look at my team and we evaluate for that week, and I realize that teams 9, 11, and 13 don't have the safety goggles, and they haven't been wearing the safety goggles. I can go to the foremans of those teams and say, all right, guys, we need to make sure that we've got the safety goggles. So here's where they are. We go and get them, acquire them, get them in their hands, and then ensure that they're communicating the importance of everybody wearing them, and then checking for adherence to that. Well, it doesn't matter what I've done to plan in January. There's no amount of strategy that's ever going to show me that on June 18th, I needed to have a conversation with the foremans of crews 9, 11, and 13, right? The only way that comes about is through that rhythm of accountability. Yeah. And either making commitments and fulfilling those, or making commitments to how I'm going to continue to fulfill those if I've fallen off target of those things. So that's what the rhythm of accountability is all about. Now, that meeting, it's short, it's quick. A lot of times it can be just a stand-up meeting. You don't need a 2-hour meeting. You don't want to draw it out. You just want to simply bring everybody together and say, remember that wildly important goal that we're focused on? Remember that lead or that lag measure? Remember these lead measures? And let each person communicate. Because here's the great thing about that environment is that if there's 5 people on the team and one person didn't do their part and the other 4 did, you don't have to go to that 5th person and say, hey, it would really be important for you to. Self-correction happens really quick. One way or the other. They either decide, hey, this is something I want to be a part of, or they realize, oh, wait, everybody else is taking this serious. I probably should take it serious too.
That's right. That's right. And so at the end of the day, we've put our wildly important goal out there. We want to grow our birthday parties. We've created our measures. We've created our scoreboard. We've done our rhythm of accountability, which is so challenging because you and I and everyone listening has sat in more than one meeting, many, many meetings where the whirlwind is just the only topic of conversation.
Absolutely.
And so if you can commit to slicing up that point of time, again, it doesn't have to be a long amount of time, and having the right people in their chairs or standing up at the meeting, reporting, it's going to make a difference.
Absolutely. It for sure will make a difference. And you're right. Don't allow that. It's easy. It's on us as leaders initially to ensure that we adhere to what we're, so in that first 4 or 5 meetings, it's going to matter whether we're like, oh, you know what? I know we said we're not going to talk about the whirlwind, but we got this really bad situation that's happening right now. So let's just have a quick No, it's on us to say, listen, we can schedule something literally 15 minutes after this meeting finishes, but we're going to get through these 4 disciplines exactly how they're prescribed today or right now, and then we can pick that up after we're done.
That's right. Never underestimate the pull of the whirlwind. It will not go away.
It will not. It will not.
In our environments, I mean, I know you can tell stories about all kinds of different industries and experiences, but the retail and especially the family entertainment space is just fraught with whirlwind. bathrooms to
I
party
can't
rooms,
imagine it.
kids growing up to, I mean, just so many different things that, people calling out sick and you've got a
Sure.
staff. And so, well, now I can have the meeting. Well, no, you got to have the meeting. So you got to figure it out. So,
Yeah.
Adam, talk a little bit about, you've got the process. You've kind of set that emotion. You've encouraged people. They've kind of read the book. They want to do that. But there's a point in there where you spoke briefly about it, where things aren't. You're doing the lead measures, but you're not getting the results that you want. And we've all heard the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So how do you kind of course correct when things aren't really hitting the way you thought they should hit?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, obviously, the whole point of those lead measures is to say, hopefully, they're predictive of what we're looking for, but they're not silver bullets. They're not things that are going to guarantee the results that we're looking for. And so, it's on us as leaders to really do two things. Number one, not abandon things too quickly, right? So we can't say after 1 week or 3 weeks, oh gosh, this isn't going to work. So because then our people lose confidence, right? They look at it and go, well, it's just another idea that he tried for 2 or 3 weeks, or she tried for 2 or 3 weeks. And so we've got to be able to have some longevity in it, but we also have to be realists to say, sometimes what we thought was going to produce the result that we're looking for, it just didn't. And so what we do is we go back and we determine, hopefully at that point, we're not saying, well, this wildly important goal isn't wildly important anymore, because the wildly important goal should have taken a lot of effort on our part to define. Again, the question is, if everything remains the same, what one or two things would have the greatest amount of impact on our business or on our organization? So we define that. Then we just say, okay, what are the lead measures? What are the things that maybe we hadn't thought of up to this point, but maybe we have observed someone else having some success? We learn something in the process, and we just have to adapt and adjust. Maybe we realize that here's a great example. Sometimes it isn't that we shouldn't be making the phone calls. Maybe it's the time that we're making the phone calls.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not so much that we say, okay, phone calls don't work anymore, so don't make the phone calls. But we realize, and we ask ourselves, well, we're calling stay-at-home moms at 8:30 in the morning, which is maybe when they're dropping their kids off at school, and 3 o'clock in the afternoon when they're picking them up from school. Maybe we ought to call them at 11 and 1 and adjust our time, right? So we make some tweaks to what our process is.
Great example.
Who are we having the conversation with at the front counter? Are we talking to the kid who might be super excited about having his birthday there, but he's not the decision maker? Are we talking to the mom when she's sitting over at the table, while the kids are jumping on her phone? Maybe we ought to say, okay, rather than in the whirlwind, because now the mom has a whirlwind of signing up at the counter, figuring out what we're going to do today, signing waivers, getting socks, getting all that stuff. Maybe we shouldn't communicate it at the whirlwind. Maybe we should wait until they're kind of they've got a little bit of downtime and they're sitting at a table or sitting in a space where we can go by and communicate at that point. So we start to refocus our energy on those lead measures.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks. I'm thinking about, we've talked about how this works kind of at a global, as an organizational level, but I'm thinking, gosh, in a adventure park, in a trampoline park, there's subsets of groups of people that can apply this same principle. So I'm thinking, you have safety monitors or court monitors that are out there blowing their whistles and doing things, and you have team leads of those teams. And if you got them together and said, okay, guys, if everything remained the same, or girls, if everything remains the same, what's one thing that you could do that could help move the needle amongst all of our court monitors, in engagement and in lowering our safety, or getting better at safety, getting more timely, higher customer service scores. Same thing with our front counter people. You've got a lead or a couple of team leads. You could pull them aside and say, okay, cashier leads, I want you to come up with a wildly important goal. Party hosts, a couple of lead party host folks, maintenance and cleaning folks, I want you to have. So each team could have the same rhythm of creating a wildly important goal, figuring out, when I think when I was an operator, what I wanted to do with teenagers that work with me is I wanted to give them a life skill. And this is just a
Right.
fantastic life skill to give them as they go from their first job and they go through high school, they graduate, they go to college, and they're out in the real world. To remember that there is a way to break out of that whirlwind.
Yeah. No, I think, just to that point first, I mean, if we approached our businesses and our organization, the people that we've brought into our organization with the idea that the least thing that they get from our business is a paycheck, now we're developing people, right? Hopefully that's the least valuable thing. Now, I'm not saying to pay them, right? We're not saying that, but hopefully the least valuable thing, because we're pouring into them, we're giving them something of value, and we're building them up. And so absolutely. And when it comes to, when it comes to our organizations, yes, it's all about each team defining what their wildly important goals are. So it's not, a lot of times we think about it in a business. Let's say that as a leadership team, we looked at our business and said, our wildly important goal is to go from X amount of revenue to Y amount of revenue by this particular date. That's perfectly fine as an organization to have that. But in order to drive that, we've got to engage all the different teams, and each team's their version of that wildly important goal is going to look very, very different, right? If my job is to be a court monitor, then, and don't have anything to do directly with sales and upsells that happen at the counter, then my wildly important goal needs to be somehow related to driving experience, driving maybe communication of future events that they could participate, something like that. But I have a different set of wildly important, I have a different set of wildly important goals and lead measures that are ultimately supporting that primary one that's within the organization. So you want to engage each team. So, they give examples in the book we talked about it at the beginning of this grocery store. So what the produce department is going to look different from what the meat department, from what the deli department, from the front end, all of them are going to look different, but they're ultimately supporting this one or two primary wildly important goals for the organization.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to encourage our listeners to not just think globally about their organization, but think about the subsets of teams within their organizations and how you can pull them in to this process of execution. So
yeah, absolutely. Great point. Fabulous point. Yeah, for sure. Sure.
Well, hey, it's been great getting to kind of unpack these 4 disciplines. What are your thoughts to just kind of wrap up and kind of put a bow on it?
Yeah, I probably the one thought would be just do it, right? So start today. One of the things that I think about within our businesses, one person I heard him put it this way, that most of the time we're not defeated by these gigantic dragons that come down and attack our organizations. Now, we might say that 2020 was a dragon. So I'm putting a little bit of an asterisk next to it, right? But in general, we're not attacked by these gigantic dragons. What's mostly happening is that we've got all these gnats just flying around in our face. They get in, they make it hard for breathe, make it hard to see. They're just distracting constantly. And so the way that we ensure that we can look back on our business some period of time from now, a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, is to take action today, right? It's 4 disciplines of execution. It's about doing something today. It's not 4 disciplines of strategy, how to build a great plan. We've probably all done that, but we've got to take some action today. So the sooner you can find the time, and here's the thing, it's never going to be convenient. It's never going to be a great time to start, right? There's always the whirlwind. It's going to happen tomorrow, promise you. It's going to happen in 5 minutes when this podcast is over. But if you don't start now, you're never going to get to where you want to go. So execute, start, do it. And it's going to be ugly. You're going to miss some things the first time around. If I had $1 for every mistake I made in this process, it's just, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to mess up, but that's okay. Yeah. Keep pushing forward, keep moving, keep doing. And in doing, you're going to get to the spot that you want to go.
Yeah. Well, Adam, thanks so much for talking with me about this, and I'll put your info in our show notes and links if people have a question they want to ask. I'm sure they can reach out, shoot you a note.
Yeah, I'd love to chat with anybody who's got any questions and help out.
Tell that you're passionate about that, so I appreciate that. So that's gonna wrap us up for another Tuesday Town Hall. Appreciate any subscribes that you can give us on Spotify or iTunes. And feel free to share this. Townhall.funspot.com. Almost got that wrong. Townhall.funspot.com website, where you can share that through any of your sources that you have, email and whatever. So glad you're here, Adam. Thanks again.
God,
And
thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
yeah,
Enjoyed it.
forward to seeing everybody again next Tuesday.